Cornel West made an appearance on Bill Maher's show recently. I can't wait to get into this discussion, I got to tell you. And Bill Maher, some people call him progressive. I call him a liberal. I'm just going to keep it real. He was trying to, I felt Bill Maher was trying to make excuses for Joe Biden. A lot of liberals are doing that. And Cornel West, I feel, really educated Bill Maher in this situation. So there's two clips. The first one that I'm going to show you shows all the excuses that Bill Maher is making for Joe Biden. And there's certain things I want to point out in this conversation that I think are important. First and foremost, shout out to Case Study QB for this clip. So let's go ahead and dive in.
Election here. And the person who got the most votes, it's a Democratic primary, but it's going to be a Democratic winner in the fall. Okay.
Right.
So it was this guy, Rick Caruso, white guy, billionaire, and Karen Bass. I know them both, like them both. Mm-hmm. She's a black congressperson.
Sure.
He beat her by 30 points with black men. What's up with that?
So I just want to jump in here and let you know they're talking about the LA mayor race, at least in this part of the discussion. Rick Caruso, he's not a politician. He's a billionaire, I believe. I have to double check that. I believe he is a billionaire, and he was a Republican and switched to a Democrat. And apparently he's polling higher than his challenger. I'll go into a little bit more about this tomorrow when Jimmy comes on. But he's polling higher than his challenger and apparently is polling pretty well with black men. And I do want to add this part here for people who are not aware. Caruso has been endorsed by Snoop. He's also been endorsed by Gwyneth Paltrow. So I think this is where like that celebrity support can come in, right? Like if you're a fan of Snoop and you love Snoop and Snoop says, I'm riding with Caruso, I'm going to vote for Caruso, he has my endorsement. Well, then if you're not really paying attention to politics like a lot of us do, if you're not really getting deep into this, it's easy for someone who's a fan of Snoop to say, oh, well, Snoop's backing Caruso, so I'm going to back Caruso too. This, I think, is sometimes one of the dangers about celebrity endorsements because celebrities have fans. And so if their fans are going to support them and they tell them you should vote for this person, it's easy for them to do that. So let's go back into the video.
You know, it's hard to say though, man. My dear brother Mark Ridley Thomas, who I love like a brother who's been mistreated in so many different ways, that when I saw what Caruso did in his ad, I had real critique of that. And so that I have a certain suspicion of certain politicians who come flying in from the top with billionaire money and think somehow they're going to be messianic in terms of dealing with the mess that sometimes they actually help cause. Now, I'm not saying that in his case, but if I looked a little deeper, I might see some connections. So in that sense,
So I like the fact that Cornel West brings up the money. And this is what I feel is missing from a lot of these interviews sometimes. Like people who are leftists and progressives, they won't bring up the money issue. So that's one thing I really liked about this discussion. He was like, we need to talk about the billionaire, the money that comes in. Now watch Bill Maher make excuses.
In politics before this.
No, and I know, but that's what it is. As you know, I mean, the organized greed has such an impact on our electoral political system that it makes it so truncated. We got a choice between neo-fascists like Brother Trump or milquetoast neoliberals like Brother Biden. Wow, well, I'm so happy to make a world-shaking decision. You know what I mean? And you think of all the decent people in America, all the decent people in the country, how do we end up so hemorrhaged with these mediocre folks?
So he lets you know right then and there, and I'm glad he said this to Bill Maher of all people, that at the end of the day, there really is no lesser to evil. Both of those options are horrible. Both of them are horrible. And if people don't feel excited about voting for you, then what does that say about you as a person? What does that say about your campaign? What does that say about your candidacy?
I see Biden is, but I see Biden is down with his black folks. Can I just read? I said I've looked into this. Here's some of the things he's done.
Sure.
Here he comes. Here comes Bill Maher, here to rescue and defend Joe Biden. And I want you to pay close attention to all the items that he mentions because I'm going to debunk them. Here we go.
One of the most diverse cabinets in history. First, of course, black and female vice president. Directed federal agencies on the first day to address the impacts of systemic racism. Extended the eviction moratorium that disproportionately helped black families remain safe during COVID. Executive order to improve educational opportunities.
Let's go through these, shall we? You know what was interesting to me is that Bill Maher did what liberals tend to do. He led with identity politics. The very first item that he mentioned on this list appointed one of the most diverse cabinets in history. Because that's how a lot of liberals think in this country. They lead with that. They lead with identity politics because they don't have anything else to go off of because he hasn't really done anything. He hasn't really improved things for people in this country. That's why people are still mad about the economic situation that they have right now. So the first thing he does, leading with identity politics. The second item, identity politics. First Black, Asian American, and female vice president. Now, to those of you who support this, who think that it's okay to lead with identity politics and that's all we should be thankful for and happy for, I ask you this question. What do those two items actually do for the American people? How does having the first Black, Asian American, and female vice president, how does that help people right now when gas is expensive? How does that help people right now when there's a baby formula shortage in this country? How does that help people right now who are just boggled down with mounds of student loan debt? How does that help people right now that don't know how they're going to pay their rent next month? Because these landlords are still increasing the rent, even though they said that they wouldn't. They're still increasing it, but our pay hasn't increased. How does that actually help people? What does that do for the American people? Economically, not a damn thing. It's just virtue signaling. That's all this is. And he led with it. Bill Maher walked right into the liberal trap. Let me lead with the black this and the black and the woman that. And that's what a lot of liberals do. The next item. Directed federal agencies to address the impacts of systemic racism on Black communities and advance racial equity. What do you need to address? The research has already been done. The data has already been given. This is one of those things I see politicians do. They create a committee to address something. They create a committee to let's do the research when the research has already been done, instead of actually fixing the issue. You can already knock off 1, 2, and 3 off this list when we're talking about what has Joe Biden really done for minorities, because making a committee to address something doesn't mean anything when the research is already done, the data is already there, and you're not actually doing anything to improve people's conditions in the community. You're not funding these schools. You're not improving transportation services. You're not paying people more. Your committee to address systemic racism isn't helping. It's not doing anything. Extended the eviction moratorium that disproportionately helped Black families remain in safe housing during the pandemic. At the same time that he kicked people off unemployment. What? He only extended the eviction moratorium because there was pressure put on him to do so. Because there were activists. And because the squad did that whole theatrics event at the Capitol, which they got approval to do so. That's the only reason why it was extended. The last one, executive order to improve educational opportunities for Black people. What educational opportunities? What were they? That could mean anything. What do you mean? I'm looking at the K through 12 system, and as someone who's an educator, you're looking at K through 12. These schools haven't been improved. School funding comes from property taxes. So if you're living in these poor, low-income neighborhoods, the school funding has not increased. So what are the educational opportunities, Bill? Break them down. Let's go on. He gives another list.
For Black people. Barred the use of chokeholds. DOJ sued Georgia over discriminatory voting laws. His cash relief program cut Black child poverty by 40%. And Juneteenth is now a federal holiday and first Black woman to the Supreme Court. No good?
No. Look, he's doing it again. Let's go through these items again, one by one. DOJ banned the use of chokeholds by federal law enforcement. He's giving more money to the police. He's not defunding the police. He's giving more money to the police. Are all of those police departments no longer doing chokeholds? I beg to differ. Not based on the videos that I've seen recently. DOJ sued Georgia over discriminatory voting laws. But that's something that helps him. That's something that helps the Democratic Party. So you can go out and vote for them. Infrastructure plan, which I told you guys, that wasn't enough money. There needed to be more added into that. So we'll let that stay, but that wasn't enough. Cash relief program cut Black child poverty by 40%. Guys, don't you remember last year they said we lift half of the kids out of poverty? And they were bragging about that. They're still bragging about this, by the way. What about the other half? What about the other half? Establish Juneteenth as a federal holiday. More identity politics. More virtue signaling. See, this is the liberal mindset. Let me tell Black people what Joe Biden has done for them. Let me remind them that he gave them Juneteenth as a federal holiday. Whoop-de-fucking-do. Does making Juneteenth a federal holiday, does that fix the schools in Black neighborhoods? Does that stop police from shooting unarmed Black people? Does that stop police from targeting Black people in those neighborhoods? The next one. Nominated first Black woman to the Supreme Court. More identity politics. What does that do to help Black people? And the last one, executive order to hold officers accountable for police misconduct. How? How are you holding them accountable? How are they being held accountable? I'm still seeing police videos come out every other day. I just saw a video about a week or two ago of a police officer tasing a pregnant Black woman on her belly. I don't see any accountability there. This is what liberals do, you guys. Do you see this? So you go ahead and you remove Juneteenth as a federal holiday, nominated the first Black woman to the Supreme Court, and the other two previously. 4 of these items that he mentioned are just virtue signals. That's it. That doesn't help Black people. The first Black woman to the Supreme Court, you know who that helps? That helps Joe Biden, and that helps the Black woman who went to the Supreme Court. That helps her. Let's go back into the video. One thing I will say as we get into this discussion right now, Cornel West is going to respond. And one thing I will say, I wish Cornel West would have pushed back on this. He didn't push back on this. He didn't call out the identity politics portion of these things listed, which I would have expected him to do, but he doesn't do that. Let's go back in.
No,
None of it.
those are wonderful, given
But why do you call them milk toast then? I mean,
he's milk toast because he still is tied to Wall Street. He's got crimes of foreign policy.
I know, but he's a politician.
Saudi Arabia is mistreating the Yemenites folk. The Israeli crimes against the Palestinians.
So do you notice here that once Cornel West mentions that Joe Biden is tied to Wall Street, Bill Maher jumps in, tries to cut him off. Every time you start to mention money, they try to cut you off. Jumps in to cut him off, and Bill Maher says, but he's a politician. You see how he can just shrug it off like that?
But he's not going to say a word about, and look, he's in town right now. We just had the People's Summit, as you know.
I know.
Right across from him, right?
Well, we had the Summit of the Americas.
With Latin America. We are on the cutting edge of human rights. We are USA in Latin America on the cutting edge of human rights with one.
Do your white guy impression again.
We are on the...
Oh, that's great.
No, but all the precious brothers and sisters in Latin America, we overthrowing democratic parties, we in friendly terms with dictators. Let's just be honest and candid, and most importantly,
yes, let's be honest and candid and say we're living in the real.
Oh, shout out to Zeneb. Thanks for this. It wasn't available to everyone either. The moratorium only went on for 90 days. Exactly. Now, here's Bill Maher again making excuses for Joe Biden. Now he's making excuses for Joe Biden being funded by Wall Street.
World. Nobody gets everything. Nobody gets everything. It's like.
Do you hear this? Now, Cornel West is talking about how people are treated in Latin America. Listen to his response.
Cutting edge of human rights with one.
Do your white guy impression again.
We are on the... Oh, that's great. No, but all the precious brothers and sisters in Latin America, we overthrowing democratic parties, we in friendly terms with dictators. Let's just be honest and candid, and most importantly,
yes, let's be honest and candid and say we're living in the real world. Nobody gets everything. Nobody.
We're living in the real world. No one gets everything. Cornel West is explaining to him what Joe Biden has done to people in the global South. How he's been treating people in other countries abroad. Bill Maher's response is, this is the real world. You can't get everything. And notice how he says it so casually. So I want to remind you, Bill Maher is wealthy. The reason why he can say that in such a casual tone, and this tends to be the liberal response, is because they're not American. He doesn't care about it because he's not affected. He's not directly affected. He's not impacted in any way because they're not in this country. And a lot of liberals, and people may not want to hear this, a lot of liberals really don't care about people in the global South. They really don't. If it's not happening in this country, they don't care about it. Bill Maher is presenting liberalism on full display. Full display. They're the ones that'll tell you that they agree with all these social issues, that people should have equal rights. But they'll still also tell you we need to keep it at arm's length away. They're the ones that'll tell you, not in my backyard. They'll tell you they agree on these things, but they don't want it next to them. That's Bill Maher. They'll say that we should be concerned about issues, but not to the point where you're asking people to fight and push back on it. Because liberals like the status quo. They like it just the way it is. They may have criticisms here and there. They may have disagreements here and there. But those disagreements will never push them to the point where they're willing to fight against it or push back on it. They're not willing to leave the comfort zone of the status quo. And Bill Maher is a perfect example of that. There's more said here.
He gets everything. It's like
you have some consistency.
You're such an absolutist.
Oh, I'm not at all.
But you are. I mean,
no,
okay, so
no, not
but
really.
You're like you mentioned. He's talking to Saudi Arabia. I agree.
You should reset the button.
Yes, of course.
It's
a tremendous hypocrisy. He's a politician. That's what part of the gig is. Wait a second.
Did you hear that? He says that Joe Biden is a politician. That's what part of the gig is. You see the liberal mindset? Again, they're fine with the status quo. Yes, these things that you mentioned about Joe Biden, yes, those things he's doing, they're wrong. But he's a politician, and that's just how the game goes. They're fine with the status quo. They don't really want to, they're not revolutionary. They don't really want to push. They don't really want to fight for anything. They just want to be able to raise their hand and say that they didn't vote for the Republican Party. He goes on.
Let me just finish.
Okay.
Yes, he doesn't want to invite the people to the Avenue of the Americas.
You got New York City on your mind.
City, the summit of the Americas.
No harm in that. No harm in that. I live in Harlem.
Because he didn't invite Cuba and Nicaragua and Venezuela because they are led by dictators, which I agree is so silly because he's about to meet with Saudi Arabia because they have the gas.
And he's got a gangster from Brazil sitting with him, meeting in private.
But if you don't get the people gas, and the people have a lot of gas already. Yeah. If you don't get they're going to lose badly, but they're going to lose even worse.
Do you see how he comes in and runs cover for Joe Biden? These are the vote blue, no matter who people. Yes, you're right. What he did was wrong. This is wrong. He shouldn't be doing this. Yes, he's a hypocrite. There's a lot of hypocrisy, but vote for him anyway.
It's just going to elect a Republican. So this is the world that we live in. Yes. People do have to make compromises.
Listen to this one more time. He says, otherwise, you're going to have to elect a Republican. See, here comes the fear mongering. This is what they do.
And he's got a gangster from Brazil sitting with him, meeting in private.
But if you don't get the people gas, and the people have a lot of gas already. If you don't get they're going to lose badly, but they're going to lose even worse. It's just going to elect a Republican. So
this is how they keep you in the Democratic Party. They're going to lose, but they're going to lose even worse. It's just going to get you a Republican elected. You see? You see how they pretend you can't do anything different? You see how they pretend you can't vote third party, you can't vote for an independent? You never hear them say, get out in the streets. I know that much. You don't hear them say that. Because someone like Bill Maher is comfortable. He's financially set. This is why you can't look to them. You can't, when it comes to celebrities, you cannot look to them for any type of revolutionary jargon. You cannot count on them to really be ready for a fight, to push and to fight back. They're not about it. They're not about it. Listen to this.
This is the world that we live in. Yes. People do have to make compromises, even good.
This is the world that we live in. People do have to make compromises. But I have a question. Why is it that the people who are always having to make the compromise is the American people? It's the working class and poor people. When we make these compromises that Bill is referring to, the people who always lose are us. The politicians don't lose. They get reelected. They get more money. They get book deals. They get speaking engagements. They get to put their kids through college and not have to, their kids have to worry to take out any student loans. So why is it this compromise that Bill Maher talks about, it seemed like to me, the people who are always on the losing end of that compromise are poor working class people. People like Bill Maher are not affected. There has to be a compromise. And the people who always end up sacrificing everything is us. This is the class divide. It's easy for someone like him who's wealthy to say that we have to make a compromise because he's not losing anything. You see what I mean? He's not losing no money. Is he having to worry about being unhoused? No. He's not losing any book deals. He's not losing his show. He doesn't have to worry about that. This is why I continue to point to the class issue.
people.
But there's a difference between, and you know, based on your wonderful Ivy League training at Cornell University.
One of the few colleges you have not taught at.
Right. Phronesis, practical wisdom is not opportunistic judgment. Just like pragmatism is not opportunism. If you make wise judgments relative to constraints, principles can be compromised, but the principles are still retained. Once you have very little principles, it's all about power, all about manipulation, all about spectacle, all about image. That's very much what American politics is about these days in both parties. Spectacle, superficial. And so when you say, well, they're hypocrites, we got to allow for the hypocrisy. No, not at all, especially when you're blues men like you and I, because I know your sensibility in terms of how you wrestle with catastrophe. When you're a blues man or a blues woman, what does that mean? You're going to tell the truth with style and a smile no matter what the consequences are and walk off and say, I hope to do better, try again, fail better, like Samuel Beckett said. Right.
Okay.
All right, and I think that's the end of this clip. Let me see, because I have another one.
Yeah, great.
Okay, and
yeah, that's the end of that clip. So I'm glad that Cornel West brought it back to the point that, listen, it's both parties. And for Bill Maher to say we need to allow the hypocrisy to continue because otherwise you end up with a Republican, that's not okay. That's not okay. They need to be called out. They need to be held accountable, period. Let's go to that other clip if we can, Eric, because there's another one where he's also talking to Bill Maher as well. And this is, again, he brings up the money. So listen to this.
Black voters in South Carolina picked the guy who could win.
Yeah.
That's what happened.
And he's a terrible president.
Well,
but the sad thing was,
he's not a terrible president.
For the first time in American history, the most progressive voting bloc of black people did not vote for the most progressive candidate, who was Brother Bernie Sanders. Right. That's very important to keep in mind.
Right.
Because Bernie.
So I'm glad that Cornel West said that too. So he's letting you know there was a time when, as black voters, we would vote for the more progressive candidate. Bernie Sanders was the more progressive candidate. Now, I have a lot of criticism of Bernie Sanders today, but he was the progressive candidate. And the majority of African Americans voted for Joe Biden. Now, there's a lot that goes along with that. There's the media smears of Bernie Sanders. There's the endorsement from Jim Clyburn. I went to college in South Carolina. Jim Clyburn is actually very influential in South Carolina for some god awful, who knows why reason. So there's a lot of things that went into that. Obama jumped in, made calls, told people to drop out of the race. There's more that goes into it. But I think a big part of this, a big piece of this, has to deal with the fact of how, as African Americans, we have kind of been brainwashed by neoliberalism. A community of people going from revolutionary leaders and thinkers and fighters to going into neoliberalism. That's what really changed, in my opinion. Now they're going to go on here.
Bernie was much more tied to the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. than Brother Joe Biden was.
Oh, for sure.
But the black leadership, with Clyburn and others, tied to the pharmaceutical company, so he can't go for Medicare for all. No, he's tied to big money, like most of these milquetoast politicians.
So I want to jump in here, and he says the black leadership were the ones that told black people to vote for Joe Biden. And that's how it goes. Now, Jim Clyburn says that he's progressive. Why are you telling people to vote against the candidate that wants to give everybody health care? If you say you're progressive, why are you telling people to vote against the progressive candidate? Because Jim Clyburn takes a lot of money from Big Pharma. I think he takes the most money from Big Pharma from anyone in Congress. I think he takes the most. I have to double check on that. But last I checked, he was taking the most of that. You have people like Nancy Pelosi, who obviously is not going to approve something like Medicare for all or something like universal health care in this country, because she's also backed by Blue Cross Blue Shield. So is Joe Biden. So this is important for people to know, because this is what tends to happen. People tend to follow the black leadership, whether that is Jim Clyburn, whether that's Reverend Al Sharpton, whoever they want it to be today, whether it's Maxine Waters. That's what typically tends to happen. So you had Black leadership turning against Black people because they want to satisfy donors, corporations, and Wall Street. Let me say that again. You have Black leaders turning against the Black community because they want to serve their donors, Wall Street, and corporations. They do not really want to help the people in the community and even in the districts that they supposedly represent. Because if that were the case, someone like Jim Clyburn would not have one of the poorest districts in South Carolina. He's been in office all those years. What has he really done for his own damn community? Not much. Not much. Let's go back in.
The big money. So you got Bernie out there laying out his vision, and we were winning in November. Remember?
What do you mean that's the first time? You had in 2016, you had the Black voters lining up strongly behind Hillary Clinton over Bernie, and in 2008, you had them behind Obama, who was not as far left as John Edwards. Right. I think that I think it's a long tradition of pragmatism among Black voters.
Yes. Or we can say pragmatism or untainted.
Well, wait a minute here. Let's go back to what Mustache Man is saying. That is a wicked mustache. I don't know what's happening there.
The first time. You had in 2016, you had the Black voters lining up strongly behind Hillary Clinton over Bernie, and in 2008, you had them behind Obama, who was not as far left as John Edwards. Right. I think that.
But I think we all know Black people voted for Obama because we wanted to have a Black president. I was guilty of that as well. I fell for the identity politics. This is, I mean, come on, man. Let's be real. Let's be real.
I think it's a long tradition of pragmatism among Black voters.
Or we can say pragmatism or untainted perception.
And in surveys now, you get white liberals having moved to the left.
But the difference was that
Black liberals.
This last election, though, brother, when we were winning in Nevada, in that sense, we could have had a major push for Black voters for Bernie. Where the first time he ran, it was an interesting kind of project. They didn't think that he really had a chance. And I mean, I supported Obama in 2008. Maybe at 4%, and the Black folk were not voting for him.
But maybe
early on, they shifted later.
Maybe people just are not that in love with socialism.
Okay, hold on. Let me respond to something. I said answer. Let me respond to something Cornel West said here. And then I'm going to get to that socialism comment by Bill Maher.
Obama in 2008, maybe at 4%, and the Black folk were not.
Got to go back a little bit further. Okay.
Liberals having moved to the left.
But the difference was that
Black liberals.
This last election, though, brother, when we were winning in Nevada, in that sense, we could have had a major push for Black voters for Bernie. Where the first time he ran, it was an interesting.
Okay, this part right here, I wish Cornel West would have mentioned this part. When he says that they were winning in Nevada, and they were, he said we could have had a push for Black voters to come over and vote for Bernie Sanders. I wish Cornel West would mention, but why did that not happen? I wish he would call out the fact that, and he may have done this before, but I'm saying in this interview in particular, I wish he would have called out the fact that because Obama made calls, it's okay, call him out. Because Obama picked up the phone, told Pete to drop out, told Amy to drop out, told Beto to drop out, let Elizabeth Warren stay in on Super Tuesday to divide the progressive vote between Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. And there were some people who switched from Bernie to Elizabeth Warren just because they wanted the progressive woman instead of the progressive man. Like, call it all out. Like, mention it. Like, why you were winning in Nevada. What happened? Whose hands were at the table? Who was playing the game? How did they win? What did they do? It's like you had Bernie Sanders sitting at a poker game, sitting at the table, and all the players had tricks up their sleeves. Call it out. I wish he would have called that out.
Kind of project. They didn't think that he really had a chance. And I mean, I supported Obama in 2008. Maybe at 4%, and the Black folk were not voting for him.
But maybe
early on, they shifted later.
Maybe people just are not that in love with socialism.
No, it's not socialism.
Well, Bernie is a socialist.
He's a New Deal, new liberal.
Okay, listen to this part one more time. Because I'm tired of this talking point, and I'm about to debunk this talking point by Bill Maher.
Shift it later.
Maybe people just are not that in love with socialism.
No, it's not socialism.
Well, Bernie is a socialist.
He's a New Deal, new liberal.
He likes to call himself a socialist.
Let's talk about this, because this is part of the problem. Bill Maher says maybe people just aren't that into socialism. I need to explain something really quick. Two things. There is a difference between social programs and socialism. They're not the same thing. One of the problems was that Bernie Sanders kept calling himself a socialist. Bernie Sanders is not a socialist. And you can put me on record to say that. I don't care. Bernie Sanders is not a socialist. Cornel West just explained to you he's a New Deal neoliberal. But you had someone like Bernie Sanders saying that he is a socialist, and he's not. By definition, he's not. When you talk about things like universal health care, a social program and socialism are two different things. If you look at all the countries that have universal health care, they're not socialist countries. Let's pull this up. Because we need to talk about this, because I want people to stop saying Bernie Sanders is a socialist. Here we go. Social programs versus socialism. They're not the same, peeps. Whoops, I think I made this too big. All right, let's scroll down here. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I do want to say this part right here. We must stop confusing social programs and socialism. These terms are a little bit similar, but in reality, both of these are two different categories of subjects. The social programs are entirely open, hands-on with every category of people present in the society. This is the reason you must know the social programs versus socialism to know the difference between the two. So let's go down here. What is socialism? And by the way, I think I'm going to do a stream on this one day, explaining all different types of socialism and the differences between them. And democratic socialism too, because let me get into that in a second. Socialism has a deep-rooted meaning. Socialism is a form of economic production where the workers are receiving the maximum of the facility. They are dividing the profit among the co-workers based on their performances. Socialism is denoting the public ownership of productions. On the other hand, the social programs invite everyone to their scheduled program and are not thinking about making some profit out of these programs. Socialism is different from social programs. Here, most production houses like factories, land, are all controlled by the public. This is the significant difference with a capitalist society. Let me go down here. There's one more part. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but there's one more part here. This part about Social Security. The government is providing Social Security, but for the service provided, they are going to hire some company to provide the service to the citizens. Then again, we are talking about Social Security. Corporate companies are getting the maximum priority. So I do want people to understand they're not the same thing. Bernie Sanders is not a socialist. And I know he calls himself that. If I really wanted to go kind of far with it, I would say he's a democratic socialist at best. And Democrat socialists also are not socialists. Democrat socialists, they still believe that capitalism can be reformed. They believe that you can put guardrails on capitalism. Socialists don't believe that. Socialists believe that capitalism is the problem, that capitalism has to go. And in a true socialist society, workers would own the means of production. We would own a piece of our work, which we do not. And there was nothing on Bernie Sanders' platform that was pushing for that. We'll go deeper into this another day. We'll go deeper into it. But I'm going to go back to the video. I'm going to do a whole separate stream on that, you guys, because I really want to break that down. There's a lot that goes into it. But that was part of the problem, that Bernie Sanders kept calling himself a socialist. And by definition, he's not. So here we go. Boop.
A lot of people like to call themselves things. He didn't run on a socialist project.
Why would you want to call yourself that? Why would you want to call yourself a term that doesn't have a positive
connotation? Because he's in love with Eugene Debs.
Do you hear what Bill Maher just said? Why would you want to call yourself a term that doesn't have a positive meaning? Doesn't have a positive meaning to who? Do you see what I mean? Do you see the liberal mindset?
Debs, and he's in love with Norman Thomas. And
okay, but people don't know who Eugene Debs is. And if they did, he wouldn't be popular.
Man, you got to teach people
I think
who
he
they
owns
are.
his socialist views, though. I think he's very proud of that, frankly. And he just primaried a guy, a Democratic congressman in Oregon who was backed by Biden, and the more socialist candidate won.
We have polling on this. I mean,
did you just hear that? Did you hear what she just said? Let me go back.
Be popular.
Man, you got to teach
I
people
think
who
he
they
owns
are.
his socialist views, though. I think he's very proud of that, frankly. And he just primaried a guy, a Democratic congressman in Oregon who was backed by Biden, and the more socialist candidate won.
We have polling.
The more socialist candidate won.
On this, I mean, the white liberal is to the left of the average Democratic black voter.
No question.
And that's what this is about for him. That's what this is about for Bill Maher. What's acceptable to the white liberal? Listen to this again. He's revealing himself. Let it all out.
But people don't know who Eugene Debs is.
And I would argue against that too. Some people do know who Eugene Debs is. Bill Maher doesn't know who Eugene Debs is. That's why he's saying that.
And if they did, he wouldn't be popular.
Man, you got to teach
I
people
think
who
he
they
owns
are.
his socialist views, though. I think he's very proud of that, frankly. And he just primaried a guy, a Democratic congressman in Oregon who was backed by Biden, and the more socialist candidate won.
We have polling on this. I mean, the white liberal is to the left of the average Democratic black voter.
No question.
And that's the measurement that he's using. See how this works? What is acceptable to the white liberal? That's the model he's going to go by. That's what he's going to use.
Right?
Every time.
On social issues and on economic issues.
Education.
Right.
Yes.
Most black voters.
Why is he asking Kellyanne Conway about what most black voters want? You guys, anybody notice this? You got Cornel West sitting right next to you, and you're asking about what black voters want. Why are you asking Kellyanne Conway instead of Cornel West? Watch this again.
I think he owns his socialist views, though. I think he's very proud of that, frankly. And he just primaried a guy, a Democratic.
Polling on this, I mean, the white liberal is to the left of the average Democratic black voter.
No question.
Right?
Every time.
On social issues and on economic issues.
Education.
On social issues and economic issues, right, Kelly? Let me get that nod and that approval from you.
Right.
Yes.
Most black voters are moderate, not liberal. More white Democrats are
the Poor People's Campaign with William Barber and Thea Harris. We're going to be there next week with him. The black community is very supportive of William Barber and company with the Poor People's Campaign.
Okay.
Just as, or even more than the white brothers.
Why is Joe Biden losing their support right now, though, according to lots of polls and articles?
Inflation.
Fucking gas.
Inflation.
I gotta go.
I don't even know what to say after that. I don't even know what to say. But it was really weird to me how he looked towards Kellyanne Conway for the confirmation about black voters instead of asking Cornel West that question. I don't know. But the point from that conversation, I'm glad Cornel West brought it back to the money, how both parties are corrupt. It's a problem. They're connected to Wall Street. All of those issues came up. I do wish that he would have pushed back more about the items that popped up about identity politics and the virtue signaling that Bill Maher was trying to do. I wish he would have pushed back against that And I also wish that he would have just called it out. Like, what happened? Why were they not winning after Nevada? I wish he would have just called out Obama and all the trickery that went on within the DNC. I mean, at this point, you really ain't got much to lose. Just go ahead and call it out.